Welcome to the RunnIT Back Podcast. I'm your host, Tony Hampton, alongside my co-host, Reggie Guyton. Today's guest is living proof that championship habits create championship lives. He first made his mark at Grant High School before becoming one of the greatest guards in Oregon State history, helping lead the Beavers to 2 Pac-10 Championships, a #1 national ranking. His remarkable college career led to being selected in the 1981 NBA draft by the Seattle SuperSonics, where he competed against some of the best players in the world. But what makes today's conversation even more compelling is what happened after basketball. For more than 30 years, Mark has built a highly successful career in real estate, proving that the discipline, the preparation, and competitive spirit that fueled his success on the hardwood can translate into long-term success in business. His impact has earned him induction into the PIO Hall of Fame, the Oregon Sports Hall of Fame, and the Oregon State Athletics Hall of Fame. Today, we'll explore the lessons from a lifetime of winning, from competing at the highest levels in hoops, to building a successful career and discovering what it truly takes to thrive long after the cheering stops. Please help us welcome Mark Radford to the program. Welcome, Mark.
Hello, good to be here.
Right on, man. Good to have you, big guy. We're excited about having you on the program. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, just excited to have a Grant High general on this particular program, the greatest high school out of the Northwest area. Right, Guyton?
If you say so. I'm just excited to have Mark on the show. Mark's, I've been a fan of Mark since we first played one-on-one at Knott Street. Not Matt Disman, but Knott Street. Back in the late 70s or something like that. I'm still, he beat me up pretty bad. So I'm just glad to have him on the show.
I know he gave you the business. I know he gave you demos the business. Well, welcome, Mark. Kind of how, Mark, we like to start off is in terms of where it started for you in terms of your love for the sport of basketball. I think we all have had those moments. And when you kind of decided, hey, man, this is something I want to pursue, for a long period of my young life. When did that begin for you, the love for the game?
Good question. Obviously, people nowadays have access to television and magazines, and they can get that inspiration much sooner. But back then, there was maybe one game a week, you'd watch. So it was hard to, it was really hard to follow. It was at its infancy. And then, our brother played a little bit, but really what motivated me was that we had a pretty competitive family, and my next oldest brother was 4 years older than I. And he beat me at everything, and I couldn't beat him in anything. And so, I was just trying to find a sport where I could beat him. And so it was more of the love and the ability I grew a little bit more than he did, and he wasn't quite as capable. And I could see the advantage I had, and that it's a strange way to fall in love with the game, but I sort of fell in love with it through the back door in terms of my only thing I could excel at, in which I could beat him. So, and it just led me to practice more and more, and then I fell in love with it. But the big thing was I moved to Seattle. And I was a small fish in a big pond, and I lived about a mile from the University of Washington. And so I had access to the Sonics and the Huskies. And so they, would go up there, and I was probably 14, 15, 16, growing. They saw my potential. And a lot of these pros and college players took me under their wing and sort of put me out on the court, made sure I got time, and just kind of grew my development because they saw some potential in me that I didn't see. So that was sort of the infancy of how I got started. Luckily moved to a place where I had access to some high-level basketball and a gym. But other than that, I would have been in love with the sport, but it was a little harder to. I had grown up in Camas, and there was nobody playing basketball there per se. So I was very fortunate we moved there, and the rest is history.
Yeah, because
you bring up a good question about when you moved back to Portland, right? You moved up to Seattle, then you came back, and in Portland, what was the difference between Portland hoops and Seattle hoops?
Yeah, I mean, I think the difference is greater now because the city has grown in Seattle. I think Portland has traditionally been a lot of guard oriented, and so the biggest difference was, I had access to pros and college players, and so I spent most of my time playing against and with those type of players. So when I came to Portland, it wasn't quite
Oh,
the
okay.
same scene. You didn't have, you might have Portland State, the University of Portland to a certain extent, but the Trailblazers weren't playing. You didn't have access to those guys per se. I did play with Maurice Lucas's. I worked his camps, and so I would have an opportunity to play against his group that he would bring in. But I felt like my exposure to a high level really, when I got to Portland, I was a big fish in a small pond, and so I was, let's say the fifth best guard in my age group in my mind, and but I could come here and excel quickly, and in there I felt like I had a ways to go to get and to mature and to get better. So it gave me the confidence, and I felt like it was easy compared to what it was like in Seattle. But at that point, they didn't have the dominating players that they do now. I mean, the amount of players Seattle's produced is astronomical. It's really off the charts.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, because I was curious, and you kind of, I think you were going down that path, is where your competitive mindset came from, right? Because just in knowing you, I know that you're extremely competitive on the court, but also you compete in golf, you compete in the tennis, you compete in backgammon. So
Yeah.
is that where your competitive mindset was born, with that brother experience and those battles?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question. We were very competitive as a family, but I think there's a certain genetic component, and I can't turn it off. I'm trying to as I get older, and I physically and mentally, it just sort of I'm trying to shut it down sometimes, but it's not. It's a fine line because you're trying to grow up and be a part of a team, and I always felt like I took everything so seriously that I might not have been the greatest friend, or because all I did wanted to beat people down. It was it's a sickness in my mind, and so I tried to tame it the best I could. But yeah, I still have it. I think as a genetic component because I've got siblings. They're not quite as competitive as I am, and so
Yeah.
it might be just the fact that I'm the youngest too. So I had to scrap and claw and get what I could get.
Yeah, I
A lot of
remember.
factors.
I remember playing sometimes against you against the Portland Pro Am when I would come back from college sometimes, and nobody would be in the gym. Maybe a couple people in the gym there for the game earlier, and I'd be walking down on your side of the court, and Mark would look at you like he didn't even know who you were. Right? I mean, I'm like, I know this. I know he know who I am. He didn't even speak because he was in a war mentality, right? And so even
Yeah,
in this the little Portland Pro Am thing where there's really nobody
yeah,
in the
yeah,
gym, you that competitive mindset I always knew that you had, and so I
yeah.
always enjoyed competing against you from that particular standpoint. So when you get here, right, you're in Portland, and now you're kind of a little bit different, right, from the Portland standpoint. You're 6'4". A lot of the guards in the Portland were, 5'10",
Yeah.
5'11", that kind of thing. Was there anybody in that era when you kind of came back that you felt, kind of gave you some issues on the court that you had to deal with in that Northeast Portland
That,
area?
that's a good question. I had a lot to learn, and I felt like it depends on where the gyms we went, but I never felt. I mean, I was bigger than most guards, and so and at the time in high school I played forward, so I was mimicking more forward stuff, and
Okay.
so I never really related to the guard position. I think the first person to try to sort of educate me was Howard Avery. Sort of,
Yeah.
he's always trying to pull you to the side, and he
Yeah.
brought in some points that, and some reference points that I had no idea because I was always had a forward mentality,
Yeah.
and I would try to out jump people and use my physicality, and I never really imagined myself as a guard. But once I, started hearing about college opportunities, and my coach at the time, Tom Jones,
Yeah.
he prepared me by in the state tournament, he said, you're going to have all these coaches and they're all going to put you at the guard position. I know you don't really, it's not your natural position right now, but you're going to have to showcase that. So he had me bring the ball up during the state championship, and I was nervous. I mean, it wasn't like I had done it in a game situation. You're out in the street ball, and you bring the ball up. It's not a big deal. I didn't fear, but I was nervous, and in that environment, traps and understanding complexity of the point guard. So, but he wanted to make sure that coaches understood that at the next level, I could do it. So he had me do it, and I succeeded. And it wasn't a big deal, but I wasn't really prepared for it. And Howard gave me some points of view, and he has his own style and the way he likes to handle it.
Yeah.
But I never felt it really suited me what his methods were. But he was a great philosopher of basketball, and it was funny because eventually in college I played against him, and it was the strangest thing because I came to town, I was maybe 16. And he might have been 20 at the time. Yeah. And I think he spent 8 years in college, and somehow he overlapped one year. He was at his 8th college, and it was the strangest thing. It was so strange. Yeah. Here he is. He was sort of like the Godfather. What he said was golden. He set the golden rules of point guard, and everything. He had his own way, and he was very astute. But now, when the rubber hit the road, it was time for us to play him. It was just, he played for like an NAI school or Division III. I can't remember what he was, Wisconsin something.
Yeah.
And oh God, it was a slaughter. I mean, the poor guy, he didn't get a chance to use any of his all that knowledge and all his ability. We oversized him, we trapped him, and it was brutal. But it was kind of funny. It was, just sort of. And looking back at the time, and I hadn't really spoken to him about it, but the poor guy had to come to Corvallis and just face us. It was pretty.
The guy, make sure he sees this podcast, right?
I just talked to him yesterday, actually.
Oh, did you? Okay, yeah. Make sure you. I've never mentioned it to him because just one of those things. It's kind of the same thing. I saw him. And, we don't shake hands. We don't talk. It's just, it was a different mentality in the modern game.
Exactly.
And, I can appreciate the modern game. They share things. They do things together. They share agents. They do all this stuff. It's so different. But back then, there's no way I was going to shake his hand. I wasn't going to talk to him.
Yep.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. And Howard's a basketball genius. He's poured into a lot of players that have come out of that area that have gone on to play in college as well as professionally. So he is a wizard when it comes to that.
Yes.
When you think about your journey and playing at Grant, what kind of stands out to you about that experience of playing at Grant in high school?
Yeah, that's a good question. They had a history when I first sophomore year with Ed Rooney. They had a platooning, and they had a vast history. You could see it on the walls, obviously. How prominent they were, and but PIO was tough. I mean, it was just some good teams, and I felt like my sophomore year, we made it to the playoffs. It's a play-in against Washington and the Channel, and I'm trying to think of all the cats.
Littleton and Cheney.
Yeah, David Littleton and Earl Cheney.
Yep.
Oh, they did just whooped on us, at the Coliseum. And it was a good wake-up call. And you could kind of see like, whoa, man, there's a different level when it comes to the playoffs and talent. And it sort of forced me to work on some other disciplines. But we hadn't really established ourselves yet. They had the bygone era of Larry Anderson and Melvin Taylor, and they never really achieved huge success, but they had talent. And I just felt like it takes more than talent to succeed in basketball. And so, try to work on some other disciplines so that we could succeed. But that guy, Danny Ainge, just kept getting in my way.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm glad you brought that up, because tell me about that Oregon travel team that you were on, and who was on it with you, and the competition you guys faced, and just how successful you guys were.
Yeah, that's good. It's sort of one of those. I think I don't even know if they had a McDonald's All-American tournament at that point. They had a McDonald's All-American team, but they weren't playing. I don't think they played games yet. But and there weren't as a lot of AUU travel teams yet. And so that was the first time I got to play on an all-star team that traveled. And so I know it's a modern thing now, but what it did was, we put together, it was Jeff Stout, who went to Lake Oswego, had a huge success. He was 6'6", and then Danny Ainge, 6'5", and myself, 6'4". We were the mainstays, even though the team that brought us there, flew us in, was Brewster Packing, which was an apple orchard farmer who had a lot of money. And he put together the team for his son. And he had, some sort of affinity to just get him exposed and have fun. So he flew us all in, and we practiced for a couple of days and went back in Florida and played in this tournament with Ainge and Stout and I. We must have averaged, like 30, 29, and 28. And we were playing against all these McDonald All-Americans from Philadelphia, New Jersey. Magic was there from Michigan, and he had Sam Vincent, but Kelly Tripucka. These are all names that most of your viewers probably don't even know anymore. But they had a whole litany of McDonald All-Americans, and they looked at us. It was a mainly all-white team from Washington, and they had no clue that how we could ball. I mean, they just were cocky, overconfident. And we ended up beating Philadelphia, their team, by 50 first game. Wow. So we woke them up. Like, this is no joke. It's no joke. And then when you get people who can play together, it's just nothing like it. And, we just had a couple of days of practice, but we all understood our roles, and we understood, the mismatches and how to make it happen. But Ainge, I hated him. I couldn't stand him until I was his teammate. And he's the best teammate in the world. I mean, he'll do anything to win. And and he's a glue. He's funny. He understands how to get the whole team involved, the bench. I mean, he's the total package. And so a lot of the viewers our listeners might not know who he is, but they always think of him as a nasty, sort of dirty player. But that cat could play. Yeah. But the host team end up. We beat New Jersey the next one. Wayne McCoy, Kelly Tripucka. I think we beat them by 40. Damn. And those were, they were the second, probably the second seed behind Michigan. And then we played the host team, and they fouled us all out. They made sure we didn't get in the finals. We were all fouled out. And we still had the game won. And it was international rules, and we were up 1, and you could take the ball out and shoot free throws, and they fouled us, and we took the ball out, and the guy threw it right to their player, and he laid it in at the buzzer. So we did not end up playing Magic in the final. And when I saw Magic play, I had never seen it. It was like just, it must have been like the Indians seeing the ship coming over from Spain or whatever. I had never seen anything like that. I never seen anybody 6'9" doing alley-oops and patting people on the butt and high fives and the energy and the style. Yeah. And I ended up playing Magic in the Far West Classic. And so, I finally did get to play against him. But that team was like North Eugene and Ainge. They had a bunch of 6'9" guys. Yeah. Wow. And against us, we're probably, they were just so long. And so, it just took us a while to really kind of figure out how to sort of respond to their length. Yeah. And we never did. When we played Michigan, they ended up winning Michigan State. They ended up winning the national championship the year we played them. So it was no fluke that they beat us. But Magic was the real deal.
So let's talk a little bit about that, because that's the year that Magic came to the Far West Classic. But correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Isiah Thomas and Indiana came that same year as well, and they won the NIT. So tell me a little bit about So tell me a little bit about both of those guys and just the Far West Classic and the amount of talent that was there. I mean, as I'm thinking about that, man, you got Hall of Fame coaches that were there too. You got Ralph Miller, you got Bobby Knight, Judge Heathcote. I mean,
that was serious.
That was serious. I mean, tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, you take it for granted because it was here every year, and I hadn't watched it. I had really no connection to the college game. I just watched pros, and so
Yep.
when I got here to Portland, and I wasn't familiar with Oregon State, Oregon, the rivalry. I didn't know anything about all that. And I thought, wow, this Far West Classic. And, and as in high school, I'd go watch it. I'd walk to the games and watch. Oh, but it was just the level of talent and the people you could see and the quality of basketball. And I just never really envisioned myself as a part of that. The Memorial Coliseum was a fantasy. You see the Trailblazers play, you watch the Far West Classic. For every kid growing up in Portland, you get a chance of playing the Glass Palace. Like that was,
that was it.
And it was packed. I mean, every game would have, I don't know, 12, 14,000 people.
Yeah.
And so, and then you're playing in front of all your people and back and when you're playing. But Magic and that squad, Indiana, I can't remember. I mean, every year it was like Larry Nance and Clemson. They had a couple players that we beat. I think I'm trying to think of some of the other teams. Man, it was loaded. There was so many teams that, and then obviously we had huge success every year. I'm trying to think. I think we won at least twice.
Yeah.
But Michigan State beat us the one year. Yeah, it was tough. And I see why they want to get rid of it, because you come here and you got 2 losses on your record. So
right.
it wasn't attainable to sustain that. And people want to pad their records now and have a winning season. So it makes sense. But there was nothing like it.
Yeah.
I heard Phil Hobson talking about, his inspiration for going to Idaho.
Oh,
that was an incredible story.
Yeah.
Rest in peace.
Yeah, it was incredible, and Guyton educated me on the fact that Indiana was there that year that you were competing in it too. I'm like, so he saw Isiah and Magic. I mean, that just had to be. I mean, that was essentially the future of that guard position. You got 2 of the top 5 guards in the history of the NBA that are playing in that Far West Classic. That had to be an amazing experience. One of the things I was also curious about in terms of your recruiting process, right? And how you ended up deciding on Oregon State, right? Because based off what we know, right? And we could be wrong on this, that you had Santa Clara that was in the mix, you had University of Washington in the mix. I don't know if you had other schools in the mix, but how did you decide on making that decision to go to Oregon State?
Yeah, it was an easy one. I'm not very good at those kind of decisions, and I don't know why. I'm sort of always trying to weigh my options, and it's a big commitment. So it took me a long time. And I think in the meantime, they offered it to Ainge, and he turned it down. And somebody else must have turned it down, because I was like the last person signed on that team. And they sort of threatened me at the end, like, we can't do this anymore. You're not going to have a spot. Yeah. But, I think the biggest thing was Steve Johnson. I mean, he was 6'10", unstoppable back in that day. Obviously, you had a center. The centers dominated. Yeah. Opportunity to play in the Pac-8 at that time. And but I didn't really know much about Oregon State. Jimmy Anderson was the assistant coach. And everywhere I turned, he was there. Track meets, basketball games. He showed up everywhere. Yeah. So, he did a wonderful job. And made sure that, I knew they wanted to, sign me, but I just couldn't commit. It just took me forever until on the very last day. I remember in the hall, I had Mr. Macon was the counselor.
Yep, I remember Mr. Macon.
Mr. Macon, and he was like, "You got to make a decision. You're out of time." I'm going, "You sure? I can't wait." And he said, "No, you got." And it was just that, it was one of those things. Like, okay, I'm just going to take Oregon State. And it was nothing more than that. And I was terrible. And in hindsight, it was a good decision. I really didn't understand the game until Ralph Miller kind of pulled me to the side, and I learned so much. And Tom Jones at the time ran a lot of the same stuff that Ralph Miller. He played baseball, but he would watch the practices, and we mimicked a lot of the things that we practiced. When I got to Oregon State, I was a step ahead of everybody. I kind of understood the drills, I understood the motion, I understood it. And so I was able to start. I was able to get big minutes right out the gate because I could excel. And it was a simple transition for me. And
how was your relationship? Because that was a great Oregon high school class that went there. So Did you have a relationship with Stout? I know you played with Stout on the travel team prior to that, but did you have a relationship with Bloom as well, or what?
Yeah, no, Ray was pretty distant. I didn't, I'd met him once at high school championships. He
Mhm.
had overalls on. I thought he was a farmer. I mean, it just he looked this. Who is this guy? He played center, and I really couldn't relate to his game. I never saw Metro play,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
Jeff and he was a gym rat, and so we played. We'd go everywhere and travel, and we'd go to Portland State, then we go to UP, then we'd go over here, and we'd go there, and so I got to know Jeff, and he was the first one to sign. He knew he wanted to go, and
Yeah.
I don't know why. I don't think it was the right decision for him. I mean, we could have used him much differently, but he wasn't. We didn't utilize him much. And then it was Andy McCloskey who I met in the All-Star game, and obviously like Ray ended up being my roommate, and we had a lot in common. And obviously people mixed us up. We're sort of similar. Our styles weren't the same, but we had a similar look. But yeah, Jeff was probably the closest, and we played the most together. But obviously, I got to know them all. I saw Charlie last night, Steve Johnson, and Andy, and
Wow.
so keep in touch with those guys. They all live in town for the most part. Ray's in town, and we did lose Rob Holbrook. He passed away, but
Yeah.
McShane's here, and so we got we keep in touch.
Right. So you mentioned Ralph Miller. How was it playing for Ralph?
Yeah, that was that. I don't know how you can prepare for it, and I never watched their practices. I didn't see their games. I kind of went in it blindly, and it's not smart. You should be able to go watch some games, see some practice, talk to some ex-players. I made that mistake. He was a drill sergeant. He was a perfectionist. He had an interesting. I thought some of the things that he did in terms of playing time, I thought was critical. He had a point system, so every practice he charted everything, so you knew plus minus, which is different than the plus minus used now. But at the end of practice, he'd post everybody's plus minus. You
Wow.
can see these 5 guys are starting. If you can't crack your plus minus, don't even expect any time. So he just went down the list. And so it took the politics, it took all the butt kissing and all the different games players do with coaches to get in their good side. It was cut and dry. Like, if you're not playing, here's why. If you want to play more, work on your turnovers, work on this, get your plus side up. But on the other hand, it sort of became risk adverse. Like, man, I'm not going to make that. I'm going to have a turnover. I'm not going to do that. I can't have, So you get players that would sort of play to the point plus minus. So there's a fine balance. But our first practice, I had a meeting. We're in our locker room, which is 2 benches and a bunch of lockers.
Right.
Just 2 long benches, wood benches.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to Jeff, I had never even seen the locker room before. And I see why when we first practiced, because it was nothing. It was the big shower. We shared it with the football team. It was nothing. And we just went to each other like, this is major college basketball. This is what we get. It's supposed to be better than this. And so we had a chip in that sense. We had a lot of chips on our shoulders. Like, when we got to advance this is ridiculous. We can do better than this. But first practice, it was 5 hours, and he was trying to break us, and he was trying to see who was going to, because we had a big freshman class of 7 freshmen. He was going to see who had what and how they were going to handle it. We did the slide where you go front, back, left, right, front. Remember that? The defensive drill?
I hated that drill.
I don't know what it's called, but
Yeah.
we did that for 30 minutes, and people were throwing up, crying, screaming. And I think that's, Steve Johnson ended up breaking his foot. I mean, because these practices were grueling. You got a stress fracture because he was too big, and you can't be having a center doing all that stuff. And we had some kind of like Chuck Taylors. That's all we had. We had no endorsement deals. We had and so it was caveman back then. It was terrible. it wasn't major college basketball, and so yeah, that was and he was a different coach. He just sat in the side, he sat in the stands, and he would smoke a cigarette, and he just had a rule book and all. And once you broke the rule, he'd come out there once in a while and give some instructions, but it was all his assistants. They did all the work. They did all the so he would just implement. But to his credit, he taught us a lot of things, and but the one thing that I liked most about his style was that he only had one play with 9 options.
Yeah.
So it's an easy learn. You just come in, here's your play. It's only one thing to do. If they do this, you do that. If they do this, it's just reactionary. And so it's simple. We're just gonna perform this play better than anybody. You can know what it is, but if you do this, we're gonna do that. So it was simple. It was very, not a lot of thinking about X over 3, number 5, hands down, flashing cards and all that. It's just too confusing. Especially, I just don't have that sort of mindset. I'm just more of a flow, and it worked perfect for my style. Although he was, with the no shot clock, we just got a little too conservative. That was as talented as we were, we should have been opening up more. But that shot clock and his ability to run 4 corners, that was our detriment.
Yeah.
There was a lot of detriments, and I could talk to you about a whole couple of hours about our detriments and all the difference all the things that it cost us to ability to win the big one. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say that leads me into 2 questions. You mentioned 4 corners. You got to tell us about that Stanford game, 1816, and then you. So tell us a little bit about that, man.
Oh man, I forgot. What's the score? 1816.
1816.
You looked it up. You sure? Was it 1816?
Yeah,
1816, man.
In the modern era, I know. Yeah, he wanted to teach them a lesson. He wanted to teach us a lesson. And we started off. I think we took a couple of bad shots, and Stanford was terrible. They hadn't won a game. They just weren't very good. And they started to stall. And he was going to prove to a point, well, you're going to try to stall against us. We're going to show you how to do it. And so we just sort of we did the same thing. We're going to show you how to stall. You want to stall? Oh, well, let's show you how to do it. So it was just, which makes no sense. The more talented team, you want more possession? Do you want more scoring? It was nerve-wracking. It was nerve-wracking because, we held it for a long time, and they would come out and trap. But it was just a chess game for him, and he wanted to teach us a lesson. You come out running and gunning and thinking you can just do whatever you want against his team. And but I can't remember. It was 1816.
Yeah.
I think I was
when
the leading
Guyton
scorer with
mentioned
6. I had 6. I think I led the team in scoring. Yeah. But it messed everybody's stats up. Everybody's stats. It was screwed up that day.
It's funny when Guyton brought that to my attention. I'm like, "Are you 1816? Are you sure?" And he said, "Hamp, you didn't see that game?" I said, "I didn't watch a lot of college basketball. I like Mark. I watched a lot of pros, and if it was on and they were slowing it down that much, I went outside and played." So one of the questions I have for you related, and I'll let you go, Guyton, too, is was that kind of did it align with your style of play and how your gifts as an athlete, that style of play, when you kind of look back, even though you guys, number one, and we'll get into all the accomplishments you guys had, but looking back, did you feel like you were able to optimize what your individual gifts were in that style of play?
Oh, no way. Not at all. I had to sacrifice.
Yeah.
And, every team, people have to make sacrifices. But I grew up street ball. And so, I needed the discipline and understanding of how to play high-level basketball and run plays. I understood that. But I could score. I could do a lot of different things. But, we relied so much heavily on defense that it's in the structure, which made sense. I was willing to sacrifice because we were so talented, and somebody had to. And really, our main focus was Steve. And unfortunately, he only played 20 minutes a game because he'd foul out. So we had to learn to play without him more so than play with him.
Okay.
But I don't think it was the best fitted for my style. And even though I took advantage of it, I had to restrict all my sort of individuality. And I felt it was worth it. I thought we would win a national championship. I thought we would succeed, and everybody would succeed. and I was willing to sacrifice for that. But in hindsight, we didn't, and so it didn't work out that way. And I have my reasons for that. But my ability to score has been proven. And again, it wasn't at the pro level per se, because I didn't play a lot, but at other venues and summer leagues and different tournaments, I've had enough points so I know I can score. But to answer your questions, I didn't. And again, I didn't have a lot of choices coming out of high school, because most national teams, big teams, didn't feel Oregon's competition level was sufficient, that we weren't battle tested, that we couldn't. And I had coaches tell me that, from different coaches, that they didn't feel we had the quality of players that they could trust. And I made those coaches pay.
Yeah, and Guyton, I'll let you go ahead and ask your question. But, when you bring that up, Mark, that was kind of the benefit of AAU and travel, kind of in the modern day era, because now you couldn't depend on, well, I look at Oregon, there's nothing there. No, Oregon can come and see you. And like the BCI team you guys did to Philadelphia and that whole crew back there. So you get kind of exposed to it. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? That's no excuse anymore. You can see you played against the best and you dominated.
Yeah.
Well, a couple of things as it relates to that, Mark. I did the AAU thing for multiple years and put 30-something guys in D1 programs. But in either case, what you alluded to earlier, that travel team you were on, the guy flew you guys in to practice, and he had deep pockets to make that happen. I think what has happened since that day is that you had more inner city programs that were able to, like for example, you mentioned Seattle. Seattle does a very good job, specifically the Rotary Style program, which is based in the inner city, and they've been able to put together a program that creates continuity and sustainability and bring in outside resources to enable them to travel, right? Without having to go to a apple farmer or whatever to make it happen. So I think that has helped put Seattle on the map and Portland on the map, and have some individual successes. Going back to Oregon State though, real quick. So you said you sacrificed, and I'm sure everyone on the team sacrificed for the greater good. And obviously, you guys had a magical run in 80, 81.
Yep.
Ranked number 1. Tell me about your emotions there, because obviously you had some great times, a great run, a extreme amount of success, but you weren't happy with the ending. So what emotions do you go through when you think about that?
Unfortunately for us, Ralph Miller was great, one of the great Hall of Fame coaches, but his mindset was based out of a history where 16 teams went to the NCAA tournament. So UCLA won every year, nobody else. My freshman year, we took second in the Pac-8. We didn't go anywhere. We went nowhere. So you had to, all he thought about was, how do we win this championship in the Pac-8? How do we win it? How do we win it? How do we win it? He didn't think about this new thing coming in the horizon, AI. He didn't think about, SpaceX. He didn't think, he didn't understand March Madness. It wasn't on his paradigm. So he didn't prepare. He wasn't even thinking about that. It came and he missed the boat. Totally missed it. And we just happened to be a byproduct as that transition. And we watched it. It was the wild, wild west while I was playing. And you don't really realize it when you're in the mix that the TV money comes in, cable comes in, they demand some changes in the game. The game starts changing right before our eyes. And then you get Magic Bird, and it was lights out. The whole game changed when Magic and Bird hit. They saw the money, they saw the potential, and everybody, and then they expanded it and expanded. They went to 32 teams, then they went to 64. I don't know how many there are now. And they got the whole nation involved. But all that happened on his watch, and he wasn't, he had his head buried in the sand. We're going to win the Pac-10. We're going to win the Pac. And so we would win this thing. We would celebrate, and the season was over in his mind. he reached his goal.
That's wow.
It's the strangest. And again, it's just my personal opinion,
Mm-hmm.
but we would have our banquet, year-end banquet. We'd all celebrate, give out awards. Yeah. The season wasn't over.
Right.
You can't celebrate. You can't.
Right.
And so they didn't prepare. He didn't have us peak. Mm-hmm. And I've seen a bunch of coaches who I felt like were terrible coaches, mm-hmm. but what do? They keep the team interested. They keep the game going and lively. They want to have them peak out right at the right time, and they're all looking goal towards March Madness. Not you could finish third in your conference. Who cares? Mm-hmm. We're trying to win and we just want to get in the March Madness, and we're going to make our run.
Yeah.
And so I don't need you to name names, but it's a different style, and maybe even the Brown. I can't think. Mike Brown
mm-hmm.
might not be the greatest coach in the world. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the season, when you're tired, you played 82 games, and you're tired of that guy, you're chirping in your ear.
Yeah,
those guys, man, they were going to do anything. They were energized. So, coaching is a strange profession, mm-hmm. and he's a Hall of Fame coach. But I felt like he missed the boat. Obviously, he didn't play; it was us playing.
Yeah.
But by the end, we lost. Didn't shed a tear.
Yeah.
Man, I was worn out.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm just worn out. By that time, the screaming, the yelling, the stress, it was a strange thing. I thought my season's over, my career's over. But that's just unfortunately how I felt. Just from being a militaristic thumb on your thumb on you the whole season.
Yeah.
Wow. It's just at some point you've got to free the players up. They got to let go. Yeah. And he's from a bygone era, and it just. I hate to say it, but that's my 2 cents worth of a phenomenal coach, got us to a certain point, but missed really how the game had changed in March Madness. So, but I get it. I mean, you couldn't get past UCLA for I don't know how many years, 25 years.
Yeah.
You weren't going to win.
Right.
And nobody else was going.
Right. Well, when I think about it though, because I did watch that game, you guys are in Poly Pavilion. I remember Rolando Blackmon hitting that J in the corner, and it's showing up at my house on Sports Illustrated. He's on the front page.
Yeah.
And you mentioned, structure is important, but also taking risk is important. And when I look at that squad, and Guyton and I were having this conversation, I said, damn, you had 2 guards that were 6'4", damn near 6'4", 6'3", which in any era is big guards. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And for our audience, Oregon State was ranked number 1 for 9 straight weeks. Okay, so this wasn't like a 1 week thing when DePaul lost. I mean, they were ranked number 1 for 9 straight weeks. But I felt like you kind of articulated and provided that wonderful insight that if things could have opened up and you become less predictable, right? That's when great athletes can really cause a problem, major problem, to kind of unlock some things. So. Thanks for sharing that, Mark. That was great.
Yeah. I mean, it's a whole laundry list. For that particular reason, and I think it's just it was unfortunate because we didn't have a postseason tournament.
Yeah.
Back then, which is important. A lot of the other leagues did. They had postseason tournaments, and it was a dogfight to get to to get through that. And so they had a taste of what the tournament was like.
Right.
And
that pressure, the
pressure in the one and done, and even though they may not win the tournament, they still knew they were going to the tournament. But it's just that whole sort of mindset. It's a different season, it's a different time, and then we got a bye, which is no good.
Right.
Now number 1 seed plays number 64 seed. Right. You at least get your feet under you. You get a sense. So you got 2 strikes against you coming into the tournament. Then you playing against, was USF playing against Kansas State. 2 good teams. These weren't some dogs from Harvard or Princeton or some teams that never played, but they were good. And then we scouted USF because they were supposed to win. We didn't even scout Kansas State.
Wow.
We come in there blind, like Rolando Blackmon. Who is that? Who's that? I didn't know who it was. We didn't know nothing about him.
Wow.
I mean, in hindsight, right? He becomes an all-star in the NBA. He has a huge career. I didn't know anything about it. Nothing.
Wow.
And then,
Wait,
so there's a huge, it's a sequence. It's like any sort of catastrophe. It's not one thing happens wrong. It's a series of events all go wrong.
yeah.
And it ends up, we end up losing. But, yeah,
We'll talk
no,
about this, right? Because now, your dream is about to be realized. I mean, you guys got bounced after being #1 by Kansas State, but now you're at the tip of the pyramid. When I say tip of the pyramid, I mean where only a few get to go to make it, which is the NBA. And you're drafted in the 3rd round, by the Seattle SuperSonics. What was that experience like, realizing a dream, really kind of going back home, being drafted by your hometown team? And also not just by any squad, right? I mean, that squad had championship players on. You had Gus, you had Jack, Sickman, you had downtown Freddie Brown. They had won a championship, right, I think, in '78. Yep. So you're not getting drafted to a team that's bottom of the bucket here. What was that feeling like, getting drafted in the NBA and also going back home, playing for the hometown team?
Yeah. That was a challenge too for me, because going back home, I really didn't want to go back. I mean, I really wanted to have a fresh start. Everybody, I had a nickname, was Mark Slow. Nobody knew who my last name. They just called me Slow. My feet were big. I was really slow when everybody knew me. And so I'm like, wow, most people couldn't believe I was the same person. And when I lived there, I used to go to the Sonic games, and I would sneak in the games. The security guards would catch me, and I would do it the next day and the next day. And pretty soon they just sort of say, "Go ahead, you're okay." And I would go in the locker rooms after the games. I would get autographs. I was totally immersed for the Sonics. So I just had, it was the wrong team. I looked up to these guys. I watched Fred play. I watched Lenny play. I watched JJ play. I'd be there as a teenager, and so now you have to go play with and against. It wasn't the greatest spot for me, and they were heavily, these cats were veterans. They all won a championship. Yep. The expectations were high, and at that point, rookies just didn't get a lot of playing time. Yeah. And so, I came into training camp, and it was me and Vinnie Johnson were head to head, and I had to play against him in training camp. Yeah. I mean, he was a beast. But he wasn't a point guard. It was weird. His game was so awkward. Yeah. That under that system, I could kind of take advantage of him, because I had more point guard. Yeah. Information and knowledge, but he was a veteran, and he was a tough, mean, sort of hard-nosed player. Yeah. So it was interesting. They ended up trading him, and they kept me. So I was like, wow, maybe I do have a chance. But I had no guaranteed contract. Mm-hmm. And they were full of guards. Mm-hmm. It was stuffed with guards, and so I wasn't hopeful. But I think Lenny saw something in me. He took a chance, and he got rid of Vinny, and it helped Vinny. You can see what his career. Yeah,
he became the microwave.
Yeah. He became the microwave. The rest is history. I mean, had he stayed there, he would have floundered. He just the system and the way it works, and that's the way at NBA. It's a jigsaw puzzle. You got to fit in the right spot. You got to have the right coach and belief. You got to get some playing time. It's challenged, but to Vinny's credit, he became. I think he should be in the Hall of Fame, if not. Yeah. But that's who I had to play against in training camp. But no guaranteed contract. There's nothing worse. Yeah. There's nothing worse. One injury, you're out. You every day you think you're gonna pack your bags and leave, and people are coming and going nonstop. They're bringing new people in to beat you, and new beat you. So it was the most stressful time in my life. But I was close to the dream. I got drafted. That's part of it, and fortunately, I was able to stay on.
What was noticeable to you in terms of from a skill set standpoint? I mean, when you first enter that first season, and you're in the practice, and now you're in the games. Were you at some point, were you awestruck, where you were like, man, this is maybe too deep a water? Or did you feel comfortable in that environment that, my game belongs here, my game is ready for this? What was your mindset from that standpoint?
Yeah, I definitely wasn't. I was not ready. I went to Summer League. They sent me to Summer League, and it was kind of a joke back then. The summer league wasn't too organized.
Yeah.
People were just it's not like it is now. There's no hype. There was no fanfare. And I was overwhelmed. I had no guidance. I didn't have an agent. Nobody was instructing me. And so I sort of floundered in the summer league. And I was awestruck, when the season started. We opened up we played the Lakers twice. And so it's like, we played them there and away. And, they were just in the beginning of their prime time. What was the name of the Showtime?
Showtime.
Yeah.
Oh, Magic was there. And so, but, we were going to contend with them as Sonics. And so, we were sort of just a notch below them, but we were competitive. And, at those points in the season, they're playing you a lot of time. They're going to expose you. The starters get out and you go out there. But I do recall my very first shot ever was I took it against Jabbar. And he took that thing and threw it like in the fourth row. Yeah, it was like, what's your expectation? What's different about the game? Yeah, you got some guys. Yeah, that's not going to let you just do whatever. You're not going to out jump him. And it was like, hello, rookie. Yeah. No, it was tough. Awestruck, and I was unprepared my rookie year. That's for sure. But by the second year, I felt confident and I had done enough. Mm-hmm. But it was very sparingly the playing time, and also I run into Freddie and Jack. We have a bunch of functions together, and then I spent some time with them now. But they weren't mentors. They were your competitors, and it was strange. All the guards are all, they're not there to mentor you.
Yeah.
And so I know you hear stories of these guys bringing, my rook. They didn't have rooks.
Yeah.
It was doggy dog.
Yeah.
And then, they were scratching for every dime they got, and they weren't making much money, and they had mouths to feed. There was no help.
There was no mentoring going on at that particular time.
And Lenny was quiet. He was a shy guy. He never said anything. If you found out something that he wanted you to do, you read it in the paper. That's the only way you found out. He had an assistant coach who was even quieter. So, but the veterans loved it, right? He didn't say anything to them, so they loved it. They ran the show. They did what they want. Leave me alone. We know what we're doing, and that's the way it was. I mean, I think he became a better coach, and obviously he was in the Hall of Fame, and rest in peace. I've talked to him a bunch of times as an adult, but at the time, boy, I was lost in the woods. I had no help. Nobody helped me.
Yeah,
which is tough. It's tough. It's hard enough game, but you need some mentoring. You need some help. You need some, But I survived, but it wasn't long. Yeah. And we can talk about that because I have a strong feeling about that. So we'll work away. I'll get back to you how I feel about the NBA and its impact on people's lives. So go ahead.
No,
well,
go ahead,
and let's stick a pin there because I definitely want to hear that. So you told us about the first time you saw Magic.
Yeah.
You had never seen anything like that.
Yeah.
In the NBA, did you see anything there that was just like, man, this is unreal. This is next level. I've never seen anything like that. There had to be somebody that, maybe it was the Kareem moment where he threw your stuff in the bleachers. But was there ever anything like that? Like, man, this is the real deal here.
Yeah, I think the superstars. I didn't. Jordan was after me, but I always felt like Bird was that other cat. Magic. You had Magic, and but Bird was something special. And I sort of had seen him from afar. And most people don't understand all the nuance of how good he was.
Yeah.
But Bird stands out as a guard. I thought that the most prolific, it was Nate Archibald.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he just sort of he had the next level of, and he was at the end of his career, how fast he was. And It's interesting because I'm a big guard and I'm quick. He couldn't out-quick me, but he was sort of like Brunson, where you get too close, he's jitterbugging, you back off, he can shoot. It was a smaller version of Brunson in that sense. Tough. He never smiled. He was just
a dog.
Oh, dog, the whole
Yeah.
time. So he gave me, he gave me a lot of trouble. But I mean, obviously, there's the superstars like Dr. J and Ice,
Yeah.
and the list is on. I felt like I played for Athletes in Action too, and I saw some of the top players in college who became big time pros, and in that list, um, Len Bias that stood out,
Wow.
and I also played against David Robinson when he had to sit out a year between college and pros, and it was the
A
same sort
monster.
of thing. Like wow,
Yeah.
it's at 7 feet he can do this, or 6'11", whatever he was. Yeah, so those are the two that stand out. But Bird, I think people poo-poo him, and I don't know why.
Yeah.
Defensively, offensively,
Yeah.
effort every
Yeah.
night.
Dog. He was a
Yeah,
dog too,
yeah,
in terms of a killer mindset.
yeah, yeah.
Well, talk about that transition you made. I know this is something that Guyton and I were talking a lot about in terms of, you're out of the NBA, right? After a few years doing it, and then you've got to transition to this real world.
Mm-hmm.
How did that transition go for you? And what were the challenges of it, of making that transition? Because every athlete eventually has to make it. I don't care if you
Yeah.
finish your high school, college, or pro career. Eventually, that transition is coming.
Yeah, I think a couple of things stand out. One was that, and here's the part. I think athletics, even at Oregon State, high school, there's all this admiration, all this fanfare, all you're spoiled, and you get all this preferential treatment. I think it's a detriment for most humans, right? Fame and all that comes with it. And so the quicker you can get out of it, sometimes it is the best. And so I felt, like there was a statement somebody made to me once that everybody you see on the way up, you'll see back on the way down. And so I try to incorporate that in my life, and treat everybody. On the court is one thing I might have ignored you, but I want to make sure that I'm not sit there and because you just that was a part of it. I knew the game would end, and at some point I'm gonna have to come back to the community.
Yep.
Got to come back somewhere, and all those people you stepped on the way up, they're gonna remember you on the way back. And so I try to treat everybody well and with respect, and I feel like that was a critical point. But yeah, that whole world is so unrealistic and such a fantasy that I was fortunate, and I ended up getting cut by the San Diego Clippers guy named Jimmy Lynam, and I ran into
I
him
know
one
Jimmy.
day. He was coaching at Portland. He had a little stint here, and I went out of my way after the game to go thank him for cutting me, and I said, you know what? I know it must be a challenge. I know it's not easy for you to do this. You cut a lot of players in your life, but I don't know if anybody's ever come up to you and said thank you, but I am. And so fortunately, he got me, snapped me out of that unrealistic world that I lived in. And I just think some players, the longer you're in it, it is harder to transition. But you're right. Most people, obviously some people don't have to do that with the money they make now, but you do have to get out there in that working world. And that was the reality of the little money as we made. And most of the guys that I played with, they all had to go to work and had to go do things, work at the bank and work at this and do this. Yeah. And it was a challenge for those guys, more so than me. But fortunately, I felt that I was exposed to some opportunities, and I had some other people who did help me, mentored me, sort of kind of gave me some ideas and saw some potential in me. But the work ethic, as you mentioned at the beginning, is critical, right? You gotta submit their grind, and you gotta start down at the bottom and figure it out. But your ego and your position in the world get in the way.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's hard to be humble and go back out there and ask and start over at the bottom when you sort of have this expectation unrealistically that here I am. Okay, I'm ready. Come and get me.
Yeah.
And there's nobody knocking on your door, right? It's just this rude, this cold-blooded reality of that you're on your own. And I don't know why the expectation is that Oregon State's going to come and people are just going to hire you because what you did and who you were. But it's unrealistic, and I had the same fantasy, but that phone wasn't ringing.
Yeah,
I had to start producing and making some things happen.
So let's talk about that second act then. You found your sense of purpose, your new place in the world, in real estate. How did that all come about?
Well, it's it was I was always curious, and I had a I don't know, I would sort of collect junk and do these different things where I I'd clean out houses for the VA, and there was a guy from Knott Street that worked at the VA, and he said, why don't you just come over here and give us some bids and do these different things? So he introduced me to clearing out houses, and then pretty soon he said, hey man, you should look at some of these lists. Here's what we're selling, and his name was Joe Johnson. I can't even remember his first name, but it was Mr. Johnson, and he sort of just kind of spoon fed me. All you got to do is do this. Mm-hmm. Really? All you got to do is that. And so he introduced me to these VA homes and clearing them out. I would bid on them. I'd get the bid, and then I would go and sell some of the things they had. I'd take it to the dump, and I go, no, I'm going to sell this. I'm going to sell this. And pretty soon I was like, wow, why don't I just fix these houses up there for sale? And why don't I fix them up? Instead of selling this piece of furniture or antique that somebody left. I think there's more money in this and more potential. But I didn't have any sort of global or light bulb come on. It was a slow process of just sort of doing this and experimentation. But then I started reading more books, and but things were different for them. Obviously, they were inexpensive, and I had a little bit of money, and so I was to be able to take advantage of some opportunities. But it was more so of I didn't necessarily want to work for anybody, and so that was some of my motivation. I knew I didn't want to go sit at a desk, be 9 to 5. My father did that, and so it didn't look that glamorous to me. For some reason, I never wanted to do it. I always wanted to work for myself, and that gave me the freedom to do it. To get involved in real estate, you're kind of your own boss. So that was sort of the impetus, and so the market obviously has improved in Portland, and that helped me. But I didn't have the crystal ball that it's going to be where it is today. But I was somewhat fortunate that right place and the right time, and I had traveled the world. And I had seen it all over the world because of basketball. I knew how beautiful and wonderful Portland is. I said, it can't stay down this long.
Right.
There's just way too many nice and beautiful things here. Other people are going to discover it at some point, and they did.
In fact, that's one of the questions I wanted to ask you is that what did you see in North Portland that other people weren't seeing? Because you were one of the first to come in, particularly in what is now a desirable area in that Lloyd Center area, right?
Yeah.
And that Irvington area. But maybe you saw what other places look like, and you're like, hey, eventually Portland is going to get there. But was there ever did anyone ever say, man, you're crazy for buying in that area or investing in that market?
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of fleeing, just as there people flee now. I mean, so everything has cycles. This cycle's been a long one. I've seen Portland, I've seen Seattle, completely decimated, people leaving, everything. So I've seen this cycle before, and I'm still optimistic that Portland will come back. And I felt obviously I felt comfortable here. I went to high school, I knew the neighborhoods, but it was strange. I at the time there was always this redlining that I was very familiar with when I first moved here from Seattle, that you couldn't live anything east of 15th. And so I lived on the west side of 15th when I first moved and stayed in a house, and we rented a house. And then I moved to 8th off of Knott. And so I was very familiar. And I looked at Irvington like it was unattainable. I'll never be able to live there. It's just right. I had a mental block. And then the house I'm living in here since 85, 86 was a VA foreclosure. I mean, it was boarded up. It was abandoned for 3 or 4 years. But that was the state of Irvington. People were fleeing. And because it was a VA, he talked me into buying it. And they had a situation where your down payment could be work. So instead of putting 5% down, which it required, you could do 5% of work. So if it equaled $10,000, you just had to go show them, I'm going to do $10,000 worth of work. And that's what I did. It needed a lot more than 10,000, but at the point, that's how I got in for nothing.
Right.
And so there's always opportunities. You do need luck. You do need somebody to help you, guide you, push you. They could see. And so I and that's why I stay and live in Northeast today. I mean, it's provided everything I've had, and I'm very loyal. And a lot of people just want to get up, they make money, and they want to get up and leave this wonderful city. And there's a lot of incentive, and the city is not doing everything they can to keep people here. But I'm gonna, despite the better opportunities other places, I'm gonna stick it out, and it's been good to me, and I'm gonna continue, even though it's not the best place to live financially.
Yeah, when you think about it, Mark, and great questions, Guyton. When you think about that whole thing around sports and business, you've been successful in sports, you've been successful in business. What principles do you feel show up in both worlds, right? That you've been able to apply those principles you learned in sports to the business world? Might be two or three, might be one, but talk to our audience about that.
Yeah. So when I became a realtor, in the first office I went to, and again, it's the challenging part. I went to the highest producing office there was in Portland, and it had a whole group of builders, and they were huge producers. And again, it's sort of a comfort zone. You can go to the smallest firm and be a big fish in a small little pond, and you sell 3 houses a year. You're the best salesman in this. Or I went to the toughest spot where they're selling hundreds of houses and they're doing big things. And I wanted to watch and observe the best and see. And I'm sort of, that's how I learned to play basketball. Like you're saying, you watch the pros, you mimic, you copy, you see what they're doing. So I have I use that same formula. I'm going to surround myself around the best, see how they do it, copy it, and use my grit and my ability to sort of grind and mimic as much as I can within the style I want to do. And so that's what I did. I end up my office was in Lake Oswego. I had set foot there a couple times at Jeff Stout's house, but I knew nothing about Lake Oswego. So I got myself out of my comfort zone. I got myself into an area, and I knew Northeast Portland, Southeast Portland. I didn't need to stay here in my comfort zone. I knew it, but it forced me into the West Side. That's where all the growth was. And then I end up going to Beaverton and Hillsborough. I end up becoming a developer and builder, and I end up, sort of using my ability to listen and outwork people. And so it's sort of dominoed. But I think the initial thing is, I guess, for people who want to take risks, is that you got to get out of your comfort zone. And so everybody wants to be comfortable, do these path of least resistance. But you got to challenge yourself to get out of that. And I think a lot of people in the city, that happens, right? They don't go out, they never expand their horizons, they never go to the ocean, they don't go to Mount Hood, they've never been outside of Northeast Portland, which is a lot here. I get it. I mean, and I understand. I was just as much of a victim of that as anybody else. I hadn't, but it's part of growth and change and expanding your horizons. And so that's part of it. That's one element. Obviously, I worked hard at it, a lot of sacrifices, and
took some risk.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
whenever you go out of your comfort zone, you've got to take some risk. This has been a great discussion, Mark. And I know Guyton's got another question he wants to ask you that we traditionally ask. We kind of talk about at the beginning of our meeting, but we'll ask you this now. Go ahead, Guyton.
Well, one of the things before I get into that is that I've always said, this is to address your point, Mark, that I've always said that your growth zone is outside of your comfort zone, right? So in order for you to grow, you got to get in that growth zone where you're not comfortable. If you're comfortable, you're not growing. As simple as that, right? So, so we ask our guests to tell us a little bit about them in terms of their success, because Tony and I our RunnIT Back podcast, our theme is that everything that you accomplish in life is on the other side of hard work. What do you think you would attribute your success to? Is it your competitiveness with that you have that's in your DNA? What is it that gives you the edge and has inspired you to be successful?
Hmm. I ask myself that quite a bit because I go back and I see people who had huge head start over me in business and opportunities, and it's a balancing act, and it's I don't want to call it a sickness, but I feel I didn't achieve, and some of it, and I have people ask me, and you have to tell yourself stories, and I just tell myself stories, unfortunately, that if Tony and I are gonna go play, he did something to so and so, you know the drill, and then I'm gonna make you pay. And so I got nothing against you, but the story I'm saying in my head, telling me in my head, is that you're an evil person. I'm gonna have to do something here to straighten this out. In a way, I'm sort of trying to simplify.
Yeah.
And I felt as though my basketball career is so it's so subjective. Basketball is too subjective in my mind. And so I wasn't necessarily satisfied, and I had to prove to myself and other people that I just wasn't just a basketball player. So it's a weird thing that I continue to drive, and it's a certain drive that of seeking and trying to compete against some arbitrary nothing out here. Right. It's just a story I'm telling myself. Mm-hmm. And the problem is I've been doing it for so long that I don't know how to shut it off. And so I'm at the point now where I'm in the twilight of a lot of things, and I can't just keep driving and striving and so it's like when I played Reggie, we played 11 and I spotted him 8 points. It's the same thing. He thinks he's got a chance to beat me because he only has to score 3, but he's not going to do it. Right. I know it. So I can't turn it off. And so I got to find a way to sort of turn this all off. And so I don't know, it's not what you want to talk about in terms of, it's a different aspect at some point, right? This competitive and drive, but it is sort of a story I tell myself. And it's all the NBA guys, all the people below, around. I'm always just competing, and they're just demons in my mind. And sometimes you just have to make up stories that I'm just going to make sure I'm not one of those cats that came in, had this, and blew it. I'm just sort of right. I'm gonna take what I had, my opportunity, and take advantage of it and succeed. But it's easy, and it's hard to really pinpoint why. And give a formula, but I think it's just more of the how I played the game in terms of stories.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. If that makes sense.
No, it makes a lot of sense, man. And as we conclude, I'm just going to say, thanks again for being on our show. And you need to make up a story that's going to help you out on the golf course.
Yeah. Well, last time we played, I didn't have any money on the game, but I think you did, and I think you're going to have to tell yourself some stories. That was an implosion you had. I hate to call you out on that one. So if you put some money on it, the outcome might be different.
There you go.
All right, thanks, Mark. Man, enjoyed having you on. Enjoyed having you on the program. Man. This has been a great discussion. I learned a lot.
Good.
So appreciate you. All right, guys.
Take care.